Alright everyone, now we have the fun news story of the day. Netflix has been completely humiliated. Jada Pinkett Smith, Pinko Smith as I would call her, has been humiliated. Woke Cleopatra, the Queen Cleopatra episode of the African Queen series, has gotten its preliminary ratings in from Rotten Tomatoes and also from others. It's basically at 0 with the audience and not very far above that with the critics now. This is very interesting. Normally what happens when you have something that's not that good, but you apply a veneer of wokeness to it so that you at least have the core woke audience, like hipsters pretending to like it. Usually what happens is the critics circle wagons. We've seen this distinction many times. So you'll go to Rotten Tomatoes, you'll see a movie or a series or an episode. The audience hates it. It's at like 20%, and this comes in far below 20, by the way. It comes in at 2% audience score. It is the lowest opening, I believe they have confirmed, for literally anything that they've ever had a ranking for on Rotten Tomatoes. Literally the lowest. Now, I'm seeing a lot of woke bullshit that is saying, well, it's ratings bombing. Well, then why are the critics largely agreeing with the audience? There's one positive ranking there in the entire thing. Just one out of all of the reviews that have been made, including by top critics, whatever the fuck that is. The critics hate it. The audience hates it. Jada Pinkett Smith probably hates all of them for being racist, and I love the idea of this being racist dogpiling because normally you can claim that because at least the critics are on board. You'll have like a 60 from the critics. It'll be a reasonable score. It's watchable. They certify that it's not terrible, basically. But here they're not doing that. There is no wagon circling of any kind. There's no attempt to defend what is largely indefensible, which is, hey, we took a classic historic figure. We completely ignored the historical backdrop and historicity of the character itself, despite the fact that it's not a fictional character. If you're going to do this with a fictional character, with Ariel from The Little Mermaid, and say, yeah, I know that this is the way that The Little Mermaid's been depicted before, but we're inverting things. You know, we're going to blackwash The Little Mermaid because we don't like redheads, basically. Disney has a characteristic habit of trying to remove redheads from literally everything that it does. I don't know. I guess it's the mid-1800s. They're part of the Know Nothing Party or something like that. They're living in Tammany Hall, I suppose, as far as the poor Irish are concerned. Is going to be another potato famine if Disney had its way. That's fine. That's a fictional character. I don't generally even bother weighing in on such things because, like, okay, but the character's not even real and never was, so who cares? It's just a storybook character. Yeah, I realize it ties into genuine, like, Grimm-era folklore and stuff like that, and on that token, it could be ahistorical, depending on the way you're depicting them, but it's not a real character. There's a genuine depiction in a time and place, but it's not a real person. Queen Cleopatra actually existed. She was part of the Ptolemaic dynasty. She had Greek and Macedonian and Persioid blood. She was born in Alexandria in the coast of Egypt. She was not born in sub-Saharan Africa. Cleopatra was Caucasian. She was a white individual. We have depictions, we have mosaics and so forth from the time period contemporary to her life, including coins, that depict the way that she looked. By the way, she did not actually look that beautiful. Cleopatra is always cast off as being this gorgeous stunner, like the total 10 out of 10 supermodel. Now, she was actually a little bit on the homely side. The reason that she was so seductive and interesting was because, unlike most females of the era, she was fully educated, multilingual, and liked philosophy and military strategy, so she could keep up with the men around her. And they had never met a woman like that before, and so they thought it was enthralling because 90% of women at the time were functionally illiterate. Even the wealthy women were not educated in philosophy and things like that. They were considered man's endeavors in ancient culture, generally speaking. Women learned about how to sew and how to prepare food and gardening and things like that, although gardening was often associated with maleness as well at the time. It was a misogynistic culture, and instead of approaching it from that angle and showing her as like the strong, empowered woman who has to really take the men to task, they just, change her race, her skin color. That is the only apparent foil for the whole show. If you're going to do the woke thing, that's fine. You can use that as a veneer in order to protect yourself from criticism and claim that anyone that doesn't like your show or your movie is racist or misogynistic or something. You can do that if you want to, but there has to be at least a little bit of talent there, and if it's a historical figure, it's a little bit more difficult to pull off. So Netflix has been humiliated. The creator has been humiliated. The idea of wokeness has struck a huge blow, actually, by this. This is the first time that the critics haven't circled the bandwagons. Do you remember the Ghostbusters reboot? And not all the wokeness in other movie franchises. What about Amazon's Lord of the Rings? The critics don't usually dare to side with the audience and just point out the obvious, well, it's shit. I'm going to assume, by the way, when I do see a differentiation, when I see that the audience likes it at 20%, so pretty bad, and the critics generally like it, I don't always assume that the critics are the ones that are wrong. Sometimes it is review bombing. We do see examples of this, but you can't claim review bombing when they both agree. I'm almost inclined to hate watch this just because it might fall into the category of so bad it becomes unintentionally hilarious. So what I would encourage Jada Pinkett Smith and Netflix to do is to take this out of that series and rehash it as a comedy. And then add a laugh track. It'll probably, you don't realize the self-deprecation aspect of that would probably be seen as hilarious. The cell phone episode. Yeah, there you go. You just made all the money back that you spent on making the episode that you're probably not going to make here with the African Queen series installment because nobody wants it. The people that are watching it are panning it. Other people like myself who are crazy might literally watch it just to be astonished at how poorly made it was. If everybody, literally everybody agrees, and it's really that low ranked, it is terrible. I don't have to see clips from it to understand that when the audience and the critics that typically do the wagon circling have instead joined the dog pile, the writing's on the wall. Well, maybe from now on, stop trying to culturally appropriate and racially appropriate people who are white. This would be like the equivalent of making a Black Leaders series and you're doing a Martin Luther King and you decide to make Martin Luther King look Chinese. I don't think it would go over very well. I think that the backlash would be enormous. And you wouldn't be able to claim racism when people fucking hate it because you took something totally talentless and vacuous and apparently very boring and poorly written and just changed the race of the protagonist in an effort to shield yourself. You wouldn't be able to do that in reverse so-called. It's the same basic idea. We should crowdfund a mini-series where we depict leaders who weren't white as being white, like very, very white. Like we could find some dude from Iceland to play Martin Luther King, and then deliberately poorly script it. Make it as wonky and gawky as possible to the point where it's a self-deprecating comedy that only stands for political satire. I bet it'd be funny. It would also get massive claims of being racist and culturally appropriating, thus entirely missing the humorous point to begin with. Leftoids don't have necessarily the greatest sense of humor. That's why they're claiming that this is a racist attack and not, hey, you fucked up. You made an episode that everyone hates. Just admit to it and move on. That's about all. Peace out.